arguably my most favorite time of the year. The first book that I want to talk about is Automatic Noodle by Annalee Newitz. This was a random recommendation from a coworker. She was getting ready to read it, anticipated release, ended up borrowing it or requesting it from the library, and I was like, I need to get in on that. That sounds absolutely adorable. So I did actually read this from the library initially, and then I did end up purchasing it because that's how much I loved it. It's quite small. I would consider this more of like novella size if we're looking at it, but this is a science fiction or just general fiction novel, depending on how you want to look at it. But it takes place in post-war between California and the rest of the United States. The setting of the book is in California. It's a very different California than I think we think of when we think of California. Like, we're looking at, there has been a war between the rest of the United States and the state of California. So it's a little bit more run down. There is, you know, there were bombings and there's rubble and things like that. But our main characters of this book are robots, and they have had, sorry if you can hear my dog, they have had multiple jobs within the time span of the war. So some of them were soldiers, some of them were previously in food service, but they're all kind of brought together to find a place in the world for them now. They are no longer commissioned. They are essentially free robots to do, you know, whatever they deem fit. They're considered free. Throughout this book, some of them are still trying to purchase their freedom from their previous owners, but I really loved this book. This is, I would say, like a feel-good, found family, food, cooking, you know what I mean? Like, it's literally called Automatic Noodle because they end up opening a noodle restaurant. And the premise of this book is essentially that they are trying to find their way post-war, but they are also attempting to save the restaurant that they're working at. It's actually a restaurant that they used to all work at, or most of them used to work at, but the owners have kind of gone MIA. So they take control of it, and they are doing really well until one blogger, as it always is, gets online and starts giving them a bunch of one-star reviews and starts trying to tank like their reviews. And essentially what happens is if their reviews tank, then they're not able to, you know, they're not essentially pushed when it comes to like marketing. So no one will be shown their restaurant, no one will shop at their restaurant, that kind of thing. This book is so much more than it seems though, and I thought it was really poignant for how short it is as well. Like, we have the question of humanity because they do oftentimes lean on like their human counterparts in the book. It was just very stunning. It was just such a sweet, simple read. This is definitely something you can read in a day, but definitely it will live with you. Like, it just has so many good like moments throughout it as well. It's just such a wonderful, like, warm bowl of noodles. It's like a big hug for the soul. So the next book I want to talk about is Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle. I was not expecting to love this as much as I did. This was definitely a blind pick for me. I borrowed it from the library and once again ended up loving it so much that I went out and purchased it. I loved our main character Misha for this novel. He is very gay. He is a writer for what I would consider like Netflix in our kind of universe that we live in. But essentially what happens is when he's younger, he sees a show that he is so convinced he's going to get to see that bit of representation in, and instead the writers for that show ended up killing off the characters instead of allowing that love to kind of like bloom. So we have kind of a conversation on that happening in this book because Misha is like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to allow it to happen on screen. It is what it is. This is something beautiful and that exists, right? And the higher ups for his Netflix are essentially like, no, you can't do that. You need to bury your gaze. And he's like, I'm not going to do it. But in choosing not to do it, there are some very dire consequences. So all of the monsters that Misha has written about in the past start hunting him and his friends. What I really loved about this book is it is a suspenseful novel, but it's also a body horror novel, but it is done in such a good way. Like, at one point in time, like the point that hooked me was in the first, I want to say like 2 or 3 chapters, and there's like a literal piano that is dropped on another man, and I am just like, okay, I'm here for it. Like, it's done so tastefully at the same time. I will say the only thing I didn't absolutely love about this was the ending. I feel like the ending was sort of rushed, and I feel like a lot of people, you know, kind of get that vibe from this book, but otherwise it was such a beautiful book for what it is. Like, for the fact that it is horror, I think that there is a place for beauty in the horror genre, and this book definitely satisfied that for me. The next book I want to talk about, number 8 on my list here, and I think it's going to be on a lot of people's lists this year, is The Night and the Moth. This is the beautiful German edition my mom sent me, but this is one of the best books I have ever read probably in my entire life. It has the most amazing secondary characters, like supporting characters. It has the most character growth I've seen in a long time, a beautiful setting, and such an interesting storyline. So her name is Six, and she's a part of a group of what we call diviners in this world. And they live at the Great Cathedral, and they can't dream, but they can drown. And there's a group of deities that are called omens who, when they are drowned and are doing these divinations, they are given kind of these visions from the omens themselves. But when Six goes to do the divination for the new king, she doesn't see anything other than all of the other omens disappearing, and they're just being a moth. Like, the omens are not present, there's just this moth there. And so she's trying to, you know, just kind of taken aback by that. The king is like, okay, well, apparently you can't tell my fortune, you know. He like laughs it off, it's whatever. His knight that comes with him, his name is Rory, is absolutely skeptical of all things divination. He's skeptical of all the diviners, the Great Cathedral, everything. And he's just straight up a jerk to her the entire time. But what ends up happening is Six's other diviners start to disappear one by one, and they're disappearing from locked rooms, they're disappearing from beds that are shared by other diviners, and Six starts losing it. She's like, I need to find my sisters. They're about to essentially be free of their commitment to being diviners. So she hunts down the king, she hunts down Rory, and is like, hey, I need help. Like, what, you know, what can I do? So then the king and Rory decide to start helping her, and they kind of go on this grand quest to find them. But later throughout the book, you kind of start realizing they're also looking for the omens, so you do get an introduction to them as well. This book, you guys, was so good. Like I said, the supporting characters, absolutely stunning. The world building, I think, could use a little bit more. It seemed more of like a vision as opposed to like something that I could really flesh out, but I'm not gonna take it a point away from that. It was just so good, and I am absolutely pumped to read the next one. If you like more fantasy, I would say romance, but this doesn't feel forced at all, and it doesn't feel like it's the whole plot of the book, in that, like, I think some romanticies are done. Rachel just writes such beautiful characters and such beautiful like dialogue, and like that internal dialogue. This is going to be right up your alley. I wish I could reread it for the first time. Number 7 on our list is one that I wish I would not have waited so long to read, and it is Gideon the Ninth. Gideon is what I would call a caretaker for the undead. This is like a sci-fi fantasy novel, but she is trying to get out of that life. She's like, I don't want the undead life anymore. I was conscripted into this. I didn't sign up for this. She was essentially an orphan who was conscribed to become a part of this necromancer group. And one day the emperor of the universe they live in decides that he needs necromancers. So enter Harrowhark, who's actually the last, or is the heir to the kind of like kingdom that Harrowhark and Gideon live in. And so Harrowhark's like, look, I'll free you, I'll let you out of all of your obligations, but you have to do this for me. You have to essentially become my swordsman in these trials that are more than likely going to kill most, if not all, of the people who are trying to become necromancers for the emperor. And it's every heir to each loyal house has to go to do this. But the reason why this book is so good, like I said, it's very like lesbian necromancers in space, which I think is just a perfect way to describe this. But Harrowhark and Gideon absolutely hate each other. Like, they spend so much time until the very bitter end just absolutely hating each other. And I loved that. I loved how sassy it was. I loved the characters. I loved how it was kind of like sexy and dark at the same time. I have nothing bad to say about this other than I wish I would not have waited so long to actually read it. This book follows our main character, Opal, and she lives in Eden, Kentucky, which is an incredibly run-down place in Kentucky, city in Kentucky. But essentially there is a coal company that is sucking Eden dry. Like, they are mining and just sucking the city dry. And her younger brother, Jasper, they are trying to essentially get him into the school to get him out of Eden. They have lost their mother. This book, as I've described it before, is just so jagged and raw and real. You are not supposed to like the characters. People go into this thinking you're supposed to like the characters. You are not. Opal is not a likable character. But she does meet our other main character, Arthur. And Arthur lives in what is called the Starling House. And the Starling House is infamous because there was a recluse author named E. Starling who lived there, who wrote a story. It was a book called Underland. And what's weird is Opal remembers reading Underland. She can kind of like, she dreams about the Underland. She can picture the Underland. And so when she meets Arthur, he hires her to kind of clean up and take care of the Starling house. And she's kind of pocketing all that money to be able to send Jasper to school because he has gotten into the school. She just needs a way to fund it. At the very basis, that is what the book is about. But this book is about so much more than that. It definitely has a little bit of a romance kind of storyline in it, which I thought was very, very interesting. And I know this book is kind of polarizing to people. People either love it or they don't. And I'm definitely one of the people that loved it. It was very creepy. Like the Starling house itself, I would consider its own character. As you get further in the book, like pretty much immediately you start to realize that that house is alive. And the story that kind of ensues, I don't think any book could top it in that way this year. It was just not what I was expecting, and so much more than I was expecting, which is saying a lot because Alex to me is like up here, like #1 new favorite author of all time. I absolutely love everything that she has written. And I am begging you to please, please, please read this book. The next book I want to talk about is one by an independent author, and I have absolutely fallen in love with basically everything that she writes. I'm reading her second book right now. Can't wait for the, I think she's gonna do like stories in the same universe but different characters. This is Untethered by Gloria Bottleman. Guys, I could go on and on and on about this book. But our main character, Lex, is 17. So this is a gothic YA, I would say horror with a little bit of romance. No spice, but a little bit of romance, right? But she lives in a town called Godra, or a city called Godra, that is overrun with the dead, essentially. People are dying left and right from a contagion of some sort, and what she's seeing is people in the middle of the night being loaded onto carts and essentially fed to the forest. And yes, you heard me right, the forest, because the forest eats people. And then on the other side of the town, there's a marsh, and they are not able to essentially escape the town. When a gentleman who I would consider a vigilante blames her for what's happening because Lux is a necromancer. She is able to bring people back to life if they are killed. And in the beginning of the book, she brings him back to life. And it's very much so like enemies to lovers, like sworn enemies to lovers. He hates everything about what she does. She hates everything about what he does and the fact that he judges her for it. But they do kind of have to come together because something's going on in the city that they live in, and they start kind of unraveling these secrets. This is, once again, we have that kind of foresty gothic horror, which I read other books this year that were like that, and this one just definitely tops. It was the most beautiful kind of horror book that I've read. Also, Gloria is a fantastic, fantastic author. You can get this from Amazon, and you can get it from her website. I actually ended up buying the Kindle book to read it on a recommendation from someone, and then ended up buying the physical copy because I was like, I have to have this on my shelves because it was just so stunningly beautiful. So would recommend this if you are into Sentient Forests, Sworn Enemies. We have conversations on grief and guilt and healing. This is the type of YA that I've been really, really missing, and it made me kind of want to jump back into the genre. So if you're looking for a good YA novel and you like horror, I would start with this one. Let's talk about my new favorite book boyfriend, The Holly King, from the Wren in the Holly Library. This was our main character, Kierce, and she lives in post-Monster War New York. So we have a fantasy setting. We have like a modern day fantasy setting. What is that called? I can't remember what the genre for that is called. You'll have to excuse me for that. But she is living in the slums, right? So she lives above a brothel with her best friend, and she's a thief. So she goes out one night and she breaks into this house, and she's like, this house isn't guarded at all. She ends up in this library, and she's stealing this very important, you know, artifact essentially. And in walks a man who's like, how did you get here? Like, how were you able to do that? And she's like, there's nothing going on. Come to find out, she is able to actually break down like wards that other monsters are able to set up because Kierce is human. So the Holly King decides to hire her to get her to steal certain artifacts that he is looking for. The reason why this is such a big deal is because post-Monster War, there is something called the Monster Treaty. So you're not allowed to steal from other monsters. Monsters aren't allowed to hunt humans. It's like a whole big thing. And this book, you guys, has some of my favorite things. So we have werewolves, we have ancient gods, we have a very unlikable love interest, like definitely very morally gray. And he maintains that morally gray throughout the two books that I have read. It was just so, so good. It was very easy to read. I feel like the pacing in this was really good. I don't feel like it lagged at any point in time. I thought the world building was beautiful. There's a lot of descriptions of sort of like the undergrounds of New York and like other portions of New York, like where the werewolf lives, where the vampires live. It was just so good. If you're looking for, I really wish I could remember what it's called, but if you're looking for this type of fantasy book, I would recommend this. It was a very slow burn kind of romance, and like I said, I love the morally great characters. I love that Kierce isn't perfect as well. She's definitely not a perfect main character, and the growth and development and change that happens with the characters throughout this novel was just so good. This is definitely the first book that I read by K.A. Land, but I would be very interested in reading anything else that she's written after having read this one and the second one, and heavily anticipating the release of the third one. The next book I want to talk about is one that I don't actually physically own because I did end up borrowing this, but it's Don't Let the Forest In. This book is a horror, it's an LGBT horror, but it's also more along the lines of like a gothic kind of nature horror. It was definitely a theme of books that I was reading this year. Our main character Andrew is going to this very prestigious school. It's picture like your classic quintessential like dark academia kind of high school, and he's very close friends with a boy named Thomas, and he's also very close with his sister named Dove. So when they get there to start their senior year, Dove essentially takes off. She's like, I'm not talking to you, like doesn't want anything to do with him, and he doesn't understand why. He's like, what the heck's going on? So he leans on Thomas a lot. What Andrew does is he writes these really dark stories that he kind of like, you know, has like brooding in his mind, and Thomas will actually draw them. Well, there's something a little bit off about Thomas at the start of the school year, and Andrew's kind of trying to figure it out. Well, essentially you start to learn that his parents have gone missing. It looks like they've been brutally murdered, and the police are suspecting Thomas. So Andrew's trying to dig into like what's going on, and this book it's so beautiful, you guys. It's so haunting. It's so dark. Please read the trigger warnings. I know this was, for a lot of people, really hard to kind of stomach. My only qualm with this book, and obviously it's a very small one, out of all the books I read this year, it still made it into the top 10, but this was less about the characters and more about the setting. But at the same token, I do actually kind of enjoy that. I wouldn't say the characters were very likable, right? But they were going through a lot. They had experienced a lot, and I thought that was kind of, you know, the point of the book for me. I think it did detract a little bit because you didn't necessarily, I don't want to say that you didn't care about the characters, because you did, but I would have liked to have seen just a little bit more character development. But I do understand why the characters were written the way that they were, and that we wanted the other aspects of the book to really shine through, and this book 1000% delivered. Like, we're talking, I had full body chills. It was so good. One of the best horror books that I read this year. Number 2 on the list here is one that shouldn't be too surprising for you guys, and it is Heavenly Bodies. I read this on Stephanie's recommendation. I'll link Stephanie's channel down below, and was so taken aback by how impressed I was. So our main character, Alara, is the princess of the Kingdom of Night, and she loses both of her parents. They are killed. And when that happens, Lorenzo, who's the prince of the Kingdom of Helios, so think like moon and sun, like Helios being sun, he kidnaps her because there is a prophecy that they have heard about Alara specifically, where she is a star killer. So there are these deities, I guess you could call them, that sort of rule separate kingdoms, right? So Helios being one of them, the sun. And she is able to, or unable to be killed by them, and she's able to kill these stars. But the prophecy also says that she will fall in love with the star, and it will be the death of both her and the star themselves. Lorenzo ends up attempting to train her as a weapon because his father, the king of Helios, has decided he's done with the stars. He doesn't want to be under their thumb anymore. He wants them gone, and he wants to use Alara to kill him. Now, this was everything I wanted. The plot was so interesting, and the kind of like juxtaposition of shadow and light was really beautiful. I also really loved that she was the shadow wielder in this. I think far too often we talk about shadow daddies, bat boys, like things like that, and while I do love me a good shadow daddy, I think that this was really beautiful because she is this strong, powerful shadow wielder. She is from the kingdom of darkness. Like, it was stunning. I would say though, for this, the only gripe that I have is I wish that romance was a little bit more slow building. So it's definitely enemies to lovers, like extreme hate to lovers, but there is a point in time when she meets Lorenzo where she is like, oh, he's hot, but I also hate him. And it was like a little bit jarring. I wish we would put a little bit of that into the world building. However, I am excited to see how the world building goes in the second book. Can't nail everything, and it was still such an enjoyable read. It is number 2 on my list of top 10. Like, that tells you a lot about it. If you guys are looking for something like that, I would pick this up. It's very unique. The characters are wonderful. They're not the most, I would say, like the nicest characters you've ever read. Like, Lorenzo's actually awful at the beginning of the book. Alara is not really like feeble, but not as strong as you want her to be. But there's such good character development in that. I love it. I wish I could read it again for the first time. And I do have the second one. I did get the second one the day that I finished the first one and still haven't picked it up. So I need to get to that. But like I said, number 2 on my list, you need to go and read it. Now, number 1 favorite book that I read of the year. This, if you have seen me talk about it, might not surprise you, or it might, but it is The Listeners by Maggie Stiefvater. This book is one of the most beautiful books I have ever read in my entire life. This book can give an Alex Harrow book a run for its money. It is a magical realism, but it's also so we have magical realism and historical fiction kind of blended together, and I did not know that that's what my little whimsical heart needed, but that is 100% what my whimsical heart needed. Our main character, June, is the general manager of the Avalon, and it is this very niche, very expensive hotel and spa, and this is towards the end of World War II, so that's kind of the setting that we're looking at, and it is in West Virginia. And she has strived her entire life to make the Avalon what it is. She is trained by the owner of the Avalon, kind of has a little bit of a romance going with the son of the owner of the Avalon, or the new owner of the Avalon. And so she's got her life figured out, right? Like, she's gonna end up with this guy, she's gonna be running the Avalon, she's happy, sane, healthy in like what she's doing. Well, world turns completely on its head when the FBI decides that they're going to be bringing in diplomats from the Axis. So think like Nazi deserters. So towards the end of the war, they were taking some prisoners from like Nazi camps and some Italians and things like that, and they were keeping them, and they were like questioning them, and they were doing like trades for prisoners of war from the United States that were in Germany and Italy and places like that. But they're housing them at the Avalon, but they are also serving them as if they are distinguished guests of the Avalon. So these staff have to kiss ass the entire time, have to like provide this great service for them, many of whom have sons and husbands that are, and you know, sisters and things that are away in this war. So they have Nazis staying in their hotel, in this luxury hotel, like in the lap of luxury, and they are complaining the entire time about this setup, right? While their families are out dying to those people. I was just like, oh my God. And the reason why I love this is I love World War II history. It is hands down my favorite period of history. I love reading about it. I love researching it. It's just so intriguing to me. So many terrible things came from that time frame, right? So to get this like other perspective, but bring in the magical realism part of this, June meets a man who ends up kind of like watching these like Nazis trying to get like secrets out of them. So we did get a little bit of a dual perspective throughout the book too, which I think was done so wonderfully. But the big secret is that the Avalon has these waters that are able to heal. So we have like that magical realism aspect of it, but those waters are also able to harm. And this book just absolutely wrecked me. It was so beautiful. It was so wonderfully written. Like I said, it has really heavy material, but it was so whimsical and magical, and kind of like the best way I can describe it is a very ethereal. And as you were reading it, it just felt like you were in this, like you could be there and you could experience it and you could see it as it was happening. And this just spoke to my soul, and I absolutely loved it. And I wish I could just like pluck it out of my brain and reread it like every 2 weeks. Like, it was just such a good book, and I would recommend this to anyone. I think everybody should read this. This was such a good read, and I can't think of any book by Maggie Stiefvater that I really enjoyed, but this one absolutely cemented her as an author that now when I see something by her, I will be picking it up because this was just absolutely breathtaking. All right, friends, so those are my top 10 books of 2025. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Have you read some of these? Are you gonna put any of these on your TBR? Let me know down below. But thank you guys for hanging out with me today. Shortly after this one, my most disappointing books of 2025 is also going to be going live. So subscribe if you want to see that, but I will see you guys in my next video.